Bienvenidos de nuevo a Oportunidades en Grecia, el podcast en el que tratamos de acercar las oportunidades que, en el marco de la internacionalización, de la exportación, la inversión y la captación de financiación, el país presenta para la empresa española. Welcome again to Oportunidades en Grecia, the podcast where we try to get business opportunities regarding exports and investments in the country Greece closer to Spanish companies. Today, we're back to water. As you all know, we have been following the sector intensively these last few years, building upon some market intelligence. As you know, we prepare a market study once a year on the subject. And the conclusions from this market study have led us to promote activity within the area of water. In multiple times, we have brought the companies to an investor forum in 2022. We did a workshop in May 2024, study trip of prescribers in March this year. Agis, who is today's speaker, Agis Papadopoulos, participated in that trip. Hi, Agis, welcome. Thanks for joining.
Hello, Jorge. It's a pleasure.
And we are looking forward to preparing a workshop again in May the 12th, this next year, 2026. So let me first introduce you to Agis, and then I will give a couple ideas about the sector, and we dive into the Q&A, which is the main purpose of the episode. So Agis is the chairman of the board at THESSALONIKI Water Supply and Sewerage Company, EYATH, and has been so for the last 6.5 years. The company, EYATH, is the one that manages water all around the cycle in Thessaloniki, therefore serving to somewhere close to around 10% of the population of the country of Greece. Agis is as well president of the German Hellenic Chamber of Industry and Commerce. Good competition there with Spain. A couple ideas, as I said, about the water sector. It has, in the case of Greece, certain very specific characteristics that have to do with the rainfall rates. I bet we will talk about that later on. Fluctuating demand due to tourism, geography, islands, continent, and so on. Second thing that I would like to mention is that the administration is trying to take well care of some of the challenges, and it's focused on improving the capacity all along the cycle. We see projects that are being executed, others that have had the tenders called already, and there is a big pipeline, as I said, all around the cycle. And then a third idea that I think it's important, that is that a big part of the activity is done by two big utilities. EYATH, which manages the water cycle in Attica, whose CEO was here in an episode a few months ago, and EYATH, which does the same thing in the area of Thessaloniki, Salonika, as we would call it in Spanish. There are some hundreds of other entities, and it seems that the way those will provide the service might change at some point. But these are the two big utilities that cover up for the market. So now, without further ado, let's just dive into the Q&A. Agis, thanks again for being here with us. I will first like to ask you for a brief description of the situation in Greece. Supply, needs.
Yeah. Okay. Once again, thank you very much for the invitation. It's a pleasure joining you in this podcast. Greece is suffering under water scarcity over the last few years, whereby, to be precise, we have to say that considering the geomorphology, the country on average doesn't suffer in scarcity. Western Greece has quite a lot of rainfalls, at least for Mediterranean conditions. We have more than 1,200 millimeters rainfall per year, precipitation per year in the western part of the country. Unfortunately, Athens, Salonika, the islands, the main touristic areas are on the eastern and southeastern part of the country, which is much, much drier. In that sense, though the average precipitation rate is not very bad, there with the demand we have a problem of supply. In addition, Greece still has a fairly strong agricultural sector, which actually accounts for roughly 80 to 85% of the overall water consumption. So if we want to be very precise, water supply to the cities is rather the smaller problem considering the water potential available. But of course, it's the most critical supply because we serve 11 million of population and another 30 million of tourists per year. So the main areas of problem are there where you have a high concentration of populations. Athens and Attica, obviously, with close to 5 million people. Thessaloniki with roughly 1.1 million people. And then you have the well-known touristic areas of the islands, of Chalkidiki in the north, of Crete, where in summer the population explodes by a factor of 5 to 10 over the tourist season, and hence it comes inevitably to shortages of the water supply and an overall highly burdened infrastructure. So I think Spain has a long experience, longer than we did actually, in managing water, also in managing peak demand during the touristic season. And this is why the trip we did upon your invitation this year in March was, for us at least, very interesting to see how you manage, and how you manage quite well, to be fair.
It's been a long year. When I was thinking about the trip, I also thought it was last year, but it was this year. It was only a few months ago.
Yes.
Very interesting because the multiple here in the population, we were talking before the episode that in Spain we receive around 100 million people. Population is 50 million people. It multiplies by 2. But here it can go up to 5 or even 10 times.
In some areas, yes.
In some areas, which is immense, huge, and a big challenge. I can understand. I wanted to ask you, how do you think the scarcity that you mentioned can be managed? And there are several alternatives I've heard of, or we've dealt with, probably also in Spain: ships, dams, desalination plants, and probably there are some other. What do you think? What's your take on this?
There is no silver bullet in coping with that demand. I mean, yes, we have been using ships to provide the islands with water for the last 40 years, but this is not exactly the most rational way to solve the problem, I think. Desalination on a small scale has also been ongoing for the last 15, 20 years, in particular in the islands. But when it comes to meeting the demands of the big cities like Athens or Salonika, then it's a slightly different story. Because what in reality happens is that we have our infrastructure which transports water from the western part of the country 150 to 200 kilometers to the east to Attica, or 80 kilometers to Thessaloniki. But yes, we have to consider all possible options. So we need, for example, dams, especially small dams, to relieve the pressure from the agricultural sector in particular. Yes, we have to work with desalination because this can cope effectively with the peak demand over the 3-4 months of the main touristic season. I don't really think that transporting water by means of ships is a feasible solution. It's an emergency measure. Okay, if there's no other way to solve a problem, yes. And of course, the most important measure of all is improving the performance of our water distribution networks, because in many cities these networks are quite old. They have quite significant losses, and it's really not an efficient way to desalinate or to use dams or whatever, so that you lose then 30 or 40% of your water in your distribution network. And this is something which, especially in smaller cities, also in part of a touristic region, needs to be seriously taken care of.
So the famous leakages, which we all have to face everywhere.
Yep.
Now let's go to another part of the cycle of the life cycle of water. Let's go to waste.
Yes.
What's the future with waste? There's a lot that has been done already in terms of tenders, big, medium-sized cities, but I guess there's still a lot to be done. Are we heading towards more of a big plant approach to waste management, or more smaller plants? What is coming?
I think, again, it's a mixture of both. First of all, we have to keep in mind there are about 230 medium to big wastewater treatment plants in Greece at the moment. And the first problem we have to take care of in reality is that the vast majority of those plants were constructed in the 90s, late 90s. So they are more or less at the end of the useful lifetime. They need to be refurbished. We have also the new directive on wastewater treatment that is really a very, 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 very high hurdle that we have to face everywhere in Europe, and the whole water sector in Europe is having some complaints and thoughts and second thoughts about it. But so on the one hand, we have to deal with the big plants or big and medium plants that are already for many years in operation. Some of them have been refurbished, some not. And then, as you mentioned, there comes the question, especially again in the touristic areas, if you have a settlement that has in winter 7,000 or 10,000 inhabitants and in summer it gets 50 or 60,000 inhabitants, then the question arises how to deal with that. A bigger wastewater treatment plant will be underutilized over at least half the year. Connecting many smaller settlements to a big wastewater treatment plant has sometimes significant restrictions due to the morphology of the ground and the distances. So this cannot be answered in reality with an overall solution. We have to see on a regional level. In some cases, it makes really more sense to make a couple of smaller treatment plants. In some other cases, it might be much better to connect the existing smaller ones to one major that is perhaps already in operation so that we can balance the seasonal fluctuation.
That's something to bear in mind. Yeah, as you said, since the peak season demands so much above the standard season, both solutions you have to measure and analyze cost benefit.
I mean, if you think Salonika, the fluctuation between summer and winter is perhaps 10-15%. It's not the end of the world. We can easily live with that. But in some other locations, it's a much higher fluctuation, and the wastewater treatment plants are especially ineffective and inefficient when they operate at partial load. So it's not really a wise piece of advice to have a wastewater treatment plant for 100,000 people when in winter it runs with 20,000 people. The operational costs will be very, very high.
Also a concept to bear in mind, the efficiency of the plants when they're underused. Now let's move on to something that has to do with water somehow, or not far, of course. That gives us or takes us also to the energy a little bit sector. The fact that there are hydroelectric plants in the country. How do you foresee hydroelectric bringing electricity to the energy pool, and what do you think about pump storage?
Okay. So we have about 3,300 megawatts of hydroelectric power plants in Greece. Vast majority of them was constructed from the 60s till the 90s. And in a sense, I think we have utilized the potential of, at least for big plants, almost entirely. There's not much potential for big hydroelectric plants left. The problem with the hydroelectric plants in Greece is that they have also a very high seasonal variation in output due to the precipitation rate. So in reality, the period from, let's say, January till April is a very good time for the hydroelectric power plants. Then it starts to get critical, especially because in most of the cases, the water reservoirs are also being used for irrigation in the agricultural sector. So one always has to strike a balance between managing the water resources to maintain a safe level for providing water to the cities, while at the same time satisfying the demand of the agricultural sector and allowing PPC, which is the owner of those power plants, to generate electricity in those times of the year when it is really also of high value in the market. So it's a difficult balance. But I think it's been managed quite effectively so far. Out of those 3,300 megawatts, some 750, so 2 plants are reversible plants, so they are being used for energy storage. because we did this even in the days when we had lignite-fired power plants as the backbone of the system, because it makes sense. And there is a new plant of about 850 megawatt in Amphilochia in western Greece under construction, which will be also used for storage because it's a reversible plant. So with these three plants, 2 operational plus 1 under construction, there will be sufficient storage potential, medium and long-term storage potential for energy produced by renewables, so mainly PVs and wind.
Those are very good news in the sense that there's all this policy in batteries, and this could actually work as the batteries.
They've been working for years, and this is actually, as I said, the main restriction comes from the availability of water, because this is the tricky part in that. But as long as we don't suffer under a severe drought, these plants work throughout the year quite nicely.
Okay, and now continue with energy, but now applied to the company itself. You have a policy towards net zero somehow.
Yes.
Would that convey a possibility for PPAs at some point?
Actually, since in my civilian life, as I say, I'm a professor on energy systems, this was one of my favorite projects when I went to EYATH in 2019. So we are the first state-owned enterprise that has successfully made a PPA. So we cover about, at the moment, three quarters, roughly up to 100 gigawatt hours per year of our electrical demand via 2 power purchase agreements, one with a wind farm and one with a PV farm. We did this, obviously, because we wanted to reduce our carbon footprint, but it helped us also a lot in the last 1.5 years, since we started with the PPA agreement, to stabilize our energy costs, which have been the most important operational cost factor of the company. Initially, we thought to use to do something by ourselves, perhaps a PV park or something like that. But the problem is that in Salonika we don't have, or around Salonika, we don't have enough space to build a few megawatts of PVs, and also that in that area the electrical grid was saturated. So we have now a virtual PPA. The wind park is somewhere in southern Greece, the PV park in central Greece, and we do the financial transaction in reality that helps us offset both our energy consumption and improve our economics.
Is it going to go towards the 100% or not necessarily?
It depends on the economics. We monitor the results because, yes, of course, ideally we would like to be 100% green. But we have to keep thinking of our shareholders. Eventually, yes, at the end, but perhaps not in the next 3 or 5 years. But eventually, I believe that all major water utilities in the 30s will have to become at least carbon neutral. I wouldn't say 100% on green energy, but carbon neutral. It makes a small difference.
Eventually, because of economic reasons.
Yes, because in most of the cases, water processing is a highly energy-intensive process. So with the fluctuating prices in European electricity markets, it's not only a matter of saving money, but it's a matter of being able to have some sort of stable prediction for your energy costs for the coming years. And this is where PPAs or your own renewable plants or whatever helps you to become stable.
Very interesting, huh? Very interesting. The rationale behind that is stability.
By the way,
economics and stability.
Yes, and also one has to keep in mind the directive for the wastewater treatment plants says that by 2040 they should be carbon neutral. Now, wastewater treatment is also such a nasty thing when it comes to energy and what comes out of it. So there are a lot of challenges that lie ahead and a lot of forces pushing in that direction.
What about the funding? Because these projects are not cheap at all. What's the role in all of these of the National Strategic Reference Framework, the IRF? What is the role played by the multilaterals, EIB, EBRD?
Okay. The municipal companies, which are smaller, than EYATH or EYATH normally operate either with a national framework or with a cohesion fund or with a public investment fund, not so much with bilateral financing. Considering EYATH and EYATH, we are a bit bigger, and actually both companies have very healthy finances. So we have a mix. Some of the investments are being financed over the European funding scheme, some smaller part actually over the national public investment plan. And we are in discussions for the last 1.5 years now with the European Investment Bank. They are willing they are very willing actually to provide us with funding for the green investments we plan. If or when we're going to expand, most probably we will be needed. For the time being, we have managed without borrowing money. We have zero, actually, loans. But this we have to. Since we are expected to expand, we will need to find funding from some direct sources. Yeah,
to face some of those challenges that you mentioned before. I wanted to ask you. Mentioned it before at some point. Where do you foresee managing the rest of the country when it doesn't come to the areas where service is provided by the two biggest utilities?
There's been an ongoing discussion, political discussion in reality, in the last 2 years about that, because we have about 128, I think, municipal water companies and another close to 700 public utilities for the irrigation. So this is a scheme that is not really effective. Many ideas have been discussed publicly, from giving the management to one super company that would manage the whole of Greece except Athens and Thessaloniki. This was discarded because this doesn't really make sense. Then there was the idea of having on a regional base a compulsory merging of the municipal water companies. There were reactions from the municipalities, as one can imagine. The discussion is going on. The current approach is that there will be a new scheme, a regulatory framework, so that municipal companies can work together and make joint ventures in reality without losing their autonomy, which is needed to plan and implement the big projects needed. But it's a difficult topic to discuss. And to be fair, one has also to keep in mind that there are very significant differences across the country. So if you can go to Western Macedonia, you have anything but a water scarcity problem. If you go to Crete, you have a water scarcity problem. So it wouldn't make sense to apply the same scheme to regions with entirely different characteristics.
This is something, about differences in the country that we barely know about when we're from outside the country. That it's so different. The western part of the country, which is green with ton of water, with the eastern part of the country and the islands.
Yes,
which is something important also to bear in mind. I want to ask you a last thing from your study trip to Madrid. Mm-hmm. There, you visited a few institutions and also companies. Mm-hmm. What is your opinion about some of the topics you got to see? And here, I would like you to tell us about digitalization of water utilities, smart water metering, waste treatment, and urban flood prevention.
I will be very frank. I was impressed from the trip to Madrid and to Valencia and to Toledo. I was impressed by the level of the water management, considering both the digitalization of managing the systems, also by the level of the expertise of the people I met. And I'm not talking about the senior management, which is, you can expect to find good people leading big companies. but especially by the very, very well-qualified and enthusiastic 20, 30, 40-year-old guys, engineers, technicians that were working in some of those companies. And also what I found very interesting, and I think this is one of the things that we could perhaps adopt a nice idea or two, about the way in which the water management is taking place, actually, so that you have so many small municipalities, but that they have one common water utility running the system, which I think would be also a nice idea to solve or to relieve at least the political pressure in Greece, because the municipalities maintain their independence in that sense, but they have one provider that takes care of the problem. On a small scale, this is what is happening also in Greece. I mean, in Thessaloniki, EYATH, we provide 8 municipalities plus another 5 which we support. And this has been established over the last 40 years and no one is complaining anymore. Similarly, in the greater area of Athens. But we have to expand the same scheme also to the more rural areas. And I think we could learn a few things from how things happened in Spain, because I think you did it very well. And also, I have no reason to hide it. I mean, there are some Spanish companies that are excellent in the water management sector. They are also internationally very active. And this is also a very interesting feature, because not many countries in Europe have so many companies that are active all over the world. There are countries where you have a more traditional municipal-based water management systems. What I found very interesting in Spain, and with the guys from the Spanish companies we had a discussion, is that you have not only technology providers, you have solution providers. And this is at the end of the day what many water utilities around the world, I've seen this in international conferences all over the world. It's not enough to say I've got some great pumps or some great smart water meters or whatsoever. What is really needed is the expertise and the experience from someone who has already been running such a big and complex piece of infrastructure. And there you have quite some companies that are quite strong in the field.
Well, Agi, there was a lot of information in all along the conversation. We talked about the specificities of the country. We just mentioned western part of the country, eastern part of the country, tourism, but also agriculture. I think that's the demand of agriculture, which is very important. You mentioned about alternatives to solve the problem of scarcity, mainly dams, maybe desalination, water distribution. Different depending on the circumstances and the situations. Same goes for new capacity for waste treatment. Could be small or bigger depending on the circumstances. There's not just one recommendation for all the country. You already have your energy, your clean energy supply through PPA, through those agreements. Up to 75% of your necessity well covered. There is a certain capacity still on pump storage, I guess. 2 plants that are already running, 1 plant that will be running, and that will cover for the needs of batteries somehow of the renewable energy in the country. You also mentioned about funding, and here it's interesting to understand that for multilaterals, there could be cooperation with the 2 big utilities. Smaller institutions will deal preferably when it comes to funding with the National Strategic Reference Framework or RRF, and so on and so forth. And then we tackled briefly your study trip to Spain. I take that it's very important there. My take is that it's very important not only having the technology, but also having a full solution has been run for time and that can guarantees that it can be implemented reasonably if exported somewhere else.
Yes, precisely. It comes to human capital at the end of the day. at least as much as it comes to hardware.
It's great to hear. It's great to hear that. So, Agi, thank you so much for joining us today here.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much again. Y nosotros nos vemos de nuevo en Oportunidades en Grecia. Aún hay mucho por conocer. Tenemos que hablar de calzado, moda y confección, de farma, de contract. Hasta pronto.